Cyberpunk 2077 was an incredibly hyped up CDProjektRed game that came out not too long ago. And while it's got its fair share of complaints about its launch, it's definitely a game that has its fans. And recently, something in the Cyberpunk universe was dropped almost unannounced. CYBERPUNK Edgerunners is an anime series set in Night City and full of blood, gore, and violence. This 10-episode anime has all kinds of characters, from Corpos to drifters and everything in between. Plus, with the new Cyberpunk 2077 DLC just announced, we felt it was time to tackle this action-adventure anime. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is CYBERPUNK Edgerunners Good to Evil. And one major caveat, massive spoilers ahead, for both Edgerunners and Cyberpunk 2077 alike. With the spoiler warning out of the way, let's talk about the best characters. And in a show about criminals, that may not be easy. These characters are the good. The very obvious winner of the Gold Medal of Good is Gloria Martinez. Gloria is an EMT and the mother of main character David. She only appears in the first episode, but cements herself as the best person in the show by far in that short time. She helps clean up all the messes that are left by cyber psychos and helps those around her. Despite this, she has severe money issues and barely makes ends meet. Despite her best efforts, she ends up dying due to a car crash, but still inspires David long after. Gloria did everything she could to give David a good life, but the universe decided to take that away. The Silver Medal of Good goes to Lucy. Lucy is one of the Edgerunners in Main's crew, specifically being a netrunner, which is essentially a hacker, being brought on by Kiwi, who we'll talk about later. Lucy starts off the series as a thief who steals from Arasaka goons and makes quick friends with David. Lucy does trick David into meeting Main and nearly getting killed, but she does care deeply about him and the rest of the crew. She shows genuine concern when David starts going cyber psycho, and he's the first one she tells about her dream of the moon. Lucy is interesting because despite her alleged betrayal at the beginning of the series, she still proves to be a very good person, at least for the circles that she runs in. She has a dark past with Arasaka and has some pretty intense PTSD after the whole Tanaka deal, where we later learn that she found that they want to use David as a test subject for a new Militech cyber skeleton because of his incredible resistance to cyber psychosis. We're placing her in the silver medal spot because she spends most of the show trying to hide that fact from Arasaka. The next character on our list and earning the bronze medal of good is Rebecca. Rebecca is another member of the Edgerunners and a fan favorite throughout the fanbase. Becca makes a pretty strong entrance, distracting their target with sexual favors, even if it doesn't last very long. She's the sister of Pillar and a surprisingly powerful and helpful ally for David.
Yo, bro, it's for you!
Although it's worth noting that she seems to be in love with David. Becca ends up as one of the final members of Main's original crew, alongside Falco, Kiwi, and Lucy. However, much like Kiwi and David, she doesn't survive the encounter with Adam Smasher. Despite this, she tries her hardest not only to help David, but the rest of the crew, even listening to Kiwi despite her betrayal. Becca is even the one who is in charge of injecting David with his suppressants, showing intense trust. Sadly, Rebecca dies, but she goes out in a blaze of glory. Up next on the list is everyone's favorite wheelman, Falco. Falco appears in the latter half of the season and sort of comes out of nowhere, being a member of Main's crew and later David's. Falco is the wheelman, driving those in the crew to their jobs, which includes the final job we see in the show. Falco seems to be a man of high standards as he leaves with Kiwi after Main punches her hard enough to knock her jaw off. He cares about the people around him, and whilst he does criminal acts, he seems to see it as part of the greater good. Falco also makes an appearance in Cyberpunk 2077, through text and mentions. He's one of the only surviving members of David's crew, and he became a recluse after his run-in with Adam Smasher. However, he seems to respect not only David, but V as well, as he sends V David's jacket. Next we have Dorio. Dorio is one of the first 3 Edgerunners that David meets, and is Main's lover. She spends most of her time with Main and David, trying to make sure that Main stays sane and David becomes a good leader and Edgerunner. Dorio shows intense care for her team, and even ends up trying to research Arasaka and Tanaka when she has a bad feeling about what he would do. Dorio is sadly killed by the NCPD and Trauma Team, and this leads to Main's further cyber psychosis. Dorio tried her hardest, and while she wasn't the best person, she tried to be the best member of the Edgerunners that she could. Rounding out the good section of our list is David Martinez. David is the protagonist of CYBERPUNK Edgerunners, and a very sad story. David grew up in a poor family, which we touched on when we talked about Gloria. After her death, he ended up becoming a mercenary, better known as an Edgerunner. He starts off as a punk kid, stealing the Sandevistan implant and getting it put in him, leading him down the dangerous road that is edge running and cyberpsychosis. David does his best to help those around him, and after joining Main's crew while he does criminal acts, they're mostly for the greater good. Sure, he gets manipulated and eventually killed by Arasaka, but in his time alive, he does everything he can to help Lucy, Rebecca, Main, and everyone else, even after losing so many people. David's fatal flaw is that not only does he only seem to care about other people's dreams and not his own, but he is a criminal, and he does end up killing an innocent woman while having an episode of cyberpsychosis, and that's the reason why he's placed at the bottom of the good tier. Speaking of which, let's move down into neutral territory. These characters fall in the gray area. First off, we have Main. Main is the leader of the Edgerunners that David joins and an old friend of David's mother, Gloria. Main's backstory is hinted at, but not fully known. What we do know is that he used to be a skinny kid who decided to upgrade through the use of cybernetics, becoming the huge leader we know. We learn pretty quickly that the Sandevistan that David obtained was supposed to go to Main. Initially, Main is hesitant to have David and his crew, but eventually comes around to liking him. The problem with Main, however, is that he very quickly falls into cyberpsychosis, and late in the season he fully falls to it, killing dozens after the death of Doria. Main does, however, recognize David and informs him that he needs to leave if he wants to survive, and it's obvious he cared for David and his mother. Main was quick to anger, but even that doesn't make him that bad, but we do have to place him in the gray area. Whilst not an Edgerunner, the next character on the list is Doc. Doc, as his name implies, is a Ripper Doc that works in Santo Domingo, being David's personal Ripper Doc for the most part. He's the one who gives David all of his upgrades. However, Doc was fully aware of how dangerous the Sandevistan was and initially refused to do the surgery until it benefited him. He's also known to be greedy and doesn't care what he does if he gets paid for it. This does hinder him because at the end of the series, he does give David his final batch of suppressants, and knows that David won't be coming back, referring to him as a cautionary tale.
Good for 9 days. It'll send you rolling over the edge.
Doc's worst crime is selling XBDs to children, or high schools anyway, which are still underage. On to our next spot, we have Pillar. He is a sort of crazy, erratic character and one of the initial 3 Edgerunners that David meets during the show. He's the one who seems the most dumbfounded by David's use of the Sandevistan and takes a quick liking to the boy. Sure, he's very annoying and rude, but he makes a good impression early on in the show. That said, to show that Edgerunners isn't some regular anime or show, he does get the short end of the stick. The boomstick, that is. After messing with a cyber psycho, he gets his head blown off in a glory display. That taught us early not to get too attached to anyone. His worst crime is being annoying, though he's also an Edgerunner and likely committed much worse. Moving on to Katsuo Tanaka. Katsuo is the rich kid bully that we meet specifically in the first 2 episodes of the show, being the son of one of the major antagonists. Being a minor antagonist, he has a decent amount of screen time, constantly trying to get David kicked out of the Arasaka school. This even leads to him beating up David outside of the school and implying that his mother was a lady of the night to piss him off. He does have some skills, but his bark is much stronger than his bite, as he cowers pretty easily and has very few morals he sticks by. Rounding out our gray area is the cyber sleuth and netrunner Kiwi. Kiwi is the premier netrunner in the crew, being the one who helps Main and later David with multiple issues. She's the one who deep dives into Tanaka's head to try and obtain the info needed for Faraday, and it's hinted that she has some sort of past with Faraday. She's among the only remaining members of the crew after David takes over, and alongside Falco and Rebecca, is usually amongst his crew on missions. Kiwi is also the one who brought Lucy into Main's crew, which one could see as a good thing, although she was unaware of Lucy's past. Kiwi does have one major issue, and that's the betrayal she does pretty late in the series, where it turns out she was working with Faraday, leading to them kidnapping Lucy and tricking David into using Cyber Skeleton. The only reason she doesn't fall into the bad or evil category is the fact that she does try to make amends on her deathbed, informing David and Falco about where Faraday was. Finally, we get to the dark side. These characters are the bad and the evil. Starting off the bad section of our list is Mr. Tanaka. Tanaka is a minor antagonist in the show, being the main target for one of Main's major missions for Faraday. He's a higher up at Arasaka who knows some information about the cyber skeleton that Faraday and Militech are looking for. Tanaka is a man who is very into the XPDs, extreme brain dances, usually sexual or full of blood and gore, and he's really into Kurosakis. These ones are edited specifically to make the pleasure and pain 10 times stronger, which is good for some people. Tanaka appears and is kidnapped by Main and crew, where they try and dive deep. He's the father of Katsuo, and either doesn't care about or actively allows Katsuo's bullying, but despite this, does try to keep David in school, specifically to have Arasaka experiment on him. Tanaka is killed by Main after the deep dive, but his time alive showed him to be a true villain, and deserving of this categorization. Right outside our bottom 3 is Jimmy Kurosaki. Jimmy is the creator of a very famous line of XPDs, specifically the Edgerunner series, which seems to be his pride and joy. He's known to be the best editor of BDs because he can make it to the specifications of the person who is wearing the BD. Jimmy makes a strong impression when he kidnaps David and starts to essentially torture him by making him experience a version of his own death in the form of another cyber psycho BD he had made specifically for David. He then attempts to kill Dorio and Lucy with some drones and only decides to help after everything else fails.
Okay. Surrender for real this time. White flag.
Jimmy tricks Tanaka into coming to his editing den so he can be kidnapped by Main and crew. However, this leads to his death at Tanaka's hands accidentally. Our brutal Borg, Adam Smasher, takes the beautiful Bronze Medal of Evil. Adam is a Night City legend, full of power, strength, and known for the slaughter of hundreds. Now, specifically speaking of this show, and not including the info from the game, Adam is a mercenary who works for Arasaka. He's sent by Arasaka to deal with David when he tries to go after Faraday and Arasaka for taking Lucy. Adam kills both Rebecca and David during his time on screen, and causes a lot of destruction as well. Adam is working mostly under Arasaka orders, and that's why he doesn't fall any lower. He even seems to want to extend an olive branch to David for him to join his team, but David refuses and Adam slays him. Snatching the Silver Medal of Evil is Faraday. Faraday is the middleman fixer that gives jobs relating to Arasaka and Militech to Main and later David. He feels high and mighty because of his status as a corporate fixer, and tries to prove that he's smarter and more important than not only David, but all of the Edgerunners. He sees them as lesser than him and finds them to be nothing but dirty mercenaries, that are only there to obey orders. This is very obvious at the end when the man decides to switch sides and betray David with the help of Kiwi. Faraday proves to be a massive threat, tricking David into using the cyber skeleton and kidnapping Lucy, and using her name against her will to have David follow orders. Faraday is intensely smart, but is also very cowardly as well, as he tries to run away with Trauma Team after being injured by David. He even sees Adam Smasher as nothing but a merc, and therefore below him, despite Adam being much stronger and much more important. Finally, speaking of Arasaka, the Gold Medal of Evil goes to Douglas and Kate. Douglas and Kate are members of the Arasaka counterintelligence crew, who are trying not only to defend their cyber skeleton, but find and test it. The two of them are the ones who nearly kill Faraday and convince him to join their side. Now, they are members of a giant corporate board that is full of dangerous people, and are the ones behind not only Faraday's deception, but the release of Adam Smasher and killing of David. Kate even throws Douglas under the bus, since she knew he would have to take the fall. They don't appear long, but they are undoubtedly the worst of the worst. And with our morality spectrum complete, let's wrap things up and award some Sinner medals. Our Darwin medal goes to Pillar, who died because he was messing with a cyber psycho for fun. The Greed medal belongs to Doc. This Ripper Doc is well known for being greedy, even David points it out. In fact, Doc also takes our Lust medal, because he's often seen watching and selling sexual XPDs. Taking the Pride medal is Faraday, who thinks he and all corporate bootlickers are above the mercenaries. The Wrath medal goes to Main, who is shown to be very angry throughout the entire series. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.